Hey there, Brittany from Just Be Crafty. Today I'm sharing how to make the granny ripple stitch. A couple years ago I made a blog post on the granny ripple stitch and included a photo tutorial. I'll have a link back to that post in the description box below if you want to check it out. I also made a blanket with this stitch with all white and fuzzy yarn. It's super soft, so if you're interested, go ahead and check that out too. In this video, I make a small swatch of the granny ripple stitch to show you an example of how to complete this technique. The pattern for this swatch has 2 peaks and 1 valley in the middle. For more details about this project and for the complete list of materials, see the link in the description box below. This granny ripple is worked in multiples of 24 chains. 24 chains gives you one upside down V, which is comprised of 4 clusters leading upwards and 4 clusters leading downwards. To make a blanket with this pattern, you will want to make a foundation chain that has a multiple of 24. Once you reach your desired number of chains that has a multiple of 24, simply subtract 2 chains from that number, and you're ready to start your blanket. If you're curious as to how I arrive at that math, keep listening, and if not, you can skip ahead a little bit. So how I came out to that math. The foundation chain for one repetition of this stitch is 24 chains, which makes one upside down V. Your very last upside down V of the row only requires 19 chains. So for this small swatch, I want to make 2 upside down V's. Initially, my chain count is 48. That's the 24 plus 24, the 2 V's. But, as I said, on my last upside down V, I only need 19 chains instead of 24. To get that number to 19, I subtract 5. So, my initial 48, then minus 5, gets me to 43. Now, to start the row, I need to add on an additional 3 chains, which will count as the first double crochet of the row. So, that's 43 plus 3, which gets me to 46. And that's my final number, and now I'm ready to start chaining. So, instead of taking my initial number, that's a multiple of 24, then subtracting 5 and adding 3, I can simply just take the difference and subtract 2 from my initial total that was a multiple of 24. Again, real quick, for anyone who might have skipped that previous part, in this example, I wanted to make a ripple with 2 upside down V's. That's 24 plus 24, which is 48. Then I just subtract 2, which gets me to my final chain number of 46. For sizing reference, my finished swatch measures to be about 12 inches. I used a 5mm hook and used worsted weight acrylic yarn. When you're ready to make a customized blanket of your own, to make sizing and figuring out your foundation chains a little easier, I've made a quick reference card with multiple blanket sizes and recommended chaining amounts to help you out. But please note, the sizing in that guide is not set in stone. It's simply a ballpark to help you achieve your desired blanket size range. The combination of your own unique gauge, hook size, and yarn type will ultimately influence your finished sizing. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you can be notified whenever I post a new tutorial. I post a new pattern tutorial every Tuesday, and I'm now starting to post a new stitch or technique every Friday, so you definitely don't want to miss out. Now, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Begin by grabbing your crochet hook. I am using a 5mm hook, and the yarn you want to start your granny ripple with, and make a slip knot. Once you've made a slip knot, you'll want to make a foundation chain of 46. And this 46 chain foundation chain is going to yield a 2 hump granny ripple swatch. So if you'd like, go ahead, pause here, and meet me back up once you've made your 46 chain foundation chain. Okay, so now we have 46 chains, and we're going to begin by placing our first double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. And then you're going to place 2 more double crochets into that same chain. So now we are going, that is your first cluster. And now we are going to skip 2 chains and double crochet in that next chain. And you're going to place 3 total double crochets. So this is your second one, and now your third double crochet in that same chain. Once again, we're going to skip 2 chains and place 3 double crochets into that next chain. So each of these 3 double crochets is forming a cluster. So going forward, you will probably hear me refer to these 3 double crochets per stitch as clusters. So now this is our next one. You skip 2 chains again, and now you're placing 3 double crochets in that chain. In this one, we're actually creating our first hump. So after you do those 3 double crochets, you're going to chain 3 and then place 3 more double crochets into that same chain. So as you can see, we've made our first hump, and now our next clusters are going to be working our way back down. So you're going to skip 2 chains and then make 3 double crochets into that next chain. So each hump and valley, you will have 4 clusters going up and then 4 clusters going down. So we're just finishing up our second cluster that is headed towards on our way down. So now you skip 2 chains again, and then you put 3 double crochets in that same chain. And now we're working on our last double crochet of that chain. And now skip 2 chains and then make 3 double crochets in that next chain. So now we're creating our first valley. So after we're done creating this double crochet, we are going to skip 5 chains. And then in that 6th chain, we're going to make 3 double crochets. Okay, so then skip 2 chains and make 3 double crochets. And now we're working our way back up to the next hump or next peak. Skip 2 chains, make 3 double crochets. And then you'll skip 2 more chains and make 3 more double crochets. And you'll notice now we're headed up, and this is our 4th cluster. So now we're ready to head back down. So this is that peak space. So you'll chain 3, and then you'll make 3 double crochets into that same chain space that you just did 3 double crochets in. And once we complete those double crochets, we're going to be working back down our peak to meet up the next valley. But we don't have another valley because our swatch is ending there. So once again, skip 2 chains, make 3 double crochets. Skip 2 chains. In the next chain, make 3 more double crochets. So right now we're working on our 3rd cluster. My yarn keeps getting tangled. Skip 2 chains. And in this last chain of this first row, we're going to make 4 double crochets. And that's just to match the very first cluster of the row, which was the starting chain 3 and then the 3 additional double crochets. And this is the only row that you'll need to worry about that for. So now we're just placing our last double crochet. And now you can see how the peaks and valleys have formed in our granny ripple swatch. So yours should start to look like this. At this point, you can go ahead and clip your yarn that you're using for that first row. And one thing I forgot to mention is when you're doing that last double crochet, that 4th double crochet, stop before you complete the last yarn over. You're going to do the last yarn over of your double crochet with your new color. So go ahead, grab your new color, do your last yarn over of the previous row's double crochet, complete it with that new yarn, and then tie your ends together just to help keep them out of the way and help to secure your new color. And now we're ready to start row 2. So to start row 2, we're going to chain up 4. And the pattern is really a breeze from this point out. So we're going to place our first cluster into that next little space between the next 2 clusters. So that little space, we're going to make 3 double crochets. And this is going to be our first cluster of the second row. And a cluster is, once again, 3 double crochets. And now we'll place a double crochets, or cluster double crochets, into the next space. So we'll place our 3 double crochets into this space, forming our second cluster of the second row. And then you'll do your next cluster in the next space. And then our next cluster space is that peak. So you're going to do your 3 double crochet cluster, followed by a chain 3. So we're doing our 3rd double crochet. Now we're going to chain 3 and then place 3 more double crochet into that same space. And once you've completed that peak, now it's time to work our way back down to the next valley. So place your next cluster into the next space. And as a reminder, you'll have 4 clusters leading upwards to the peak and then 4 clusters leading downward to each of the valleys. So if you ever notice that you have more or less than that, then something went wonky in the pattern and you'll have to frog it until you find the space where the last space that you have the correct amount of clusters. So next, you're going to do your next cluster. This is our last cluster leading down to that valley. And to form the valley, you'll see that we'll actually skip that next cluster space that was sitting on top of that skipped 5 chains. And we're going to make our 3 double crochet cluster in that next space. So this cluster is our first cluster going up, working our way up to the next peak. So basically we're just going to complete the same process that we had before. So this is just what your work should start looking like. You'll just want to keep completing the process of making your clusters in each of the spaces as you work up to each peak and down to each valley. So now we're entering our second peak, and that's going to be our 3 double crochet cluster, followed by chain 3, and then 3 more double crochets in that same chain space. Okay, and now we're working our way back down our last little stretch here. So right now we're working on the second cluster of our downward slant. And now our third. And now we're working on our last cluster of the row. Okay, so once we complete our last cluster of the row, we will make a double crochet in that chain space from the previous row. And that double crochet is going to match the starting chain 4 of your row. So before you complete your last double crochet like we did in the previous row, you're going to cut your yarn and you're going to complete your last yarn over of your double crochet with the new color. And by using this technique, this is what helps give you a nice flat and even color transition. So go ahead and tie those tails. And we can get started on row 3. So once again, to start your row, you're going to chain up 4, and you're going to make your first 3 double crochet cluster in that next cluster space. And you're just going to keep repeating the process of making your 3 double crochet clusters in each space up until you get to the next peak. And then in the peaks, you'll do 3 double crochet cluster, followed by a chain 3, followed by another 3 double crochet cluster. And now we're going to work our way back down to the next valley, and you're just going to do your 3 double crochet clusters in each of your spaces until you get down to the valley. And then once you finish your 4 clusters, you know it's time to skip the next cluster space. And you're going to skip that space and then make your next cluster in the next space. And now our clusters are working their way back up to the next peak. Continue as you have been moving until you get up to the next peak. And you guessed it, once you're at that peak, you're going to do 3 double crochet, chain 3, and 3 double crochet in that same space. And now we're going to just work our way back down. My yarn keeps getting tangled, as you can see, and now we're working on our last cluster. And our final double crochet is going to go in the chain space from the previous row. And you're just going to keep going back and forth in rows just like this until you reach your desired length. And this is what your swatch should be looking like. I really hope you found this tutorial helpful, and if you did, please be sure to give the video a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so that way you never miss a new tutorial. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.